So a lot of you guys are missing the secret sauce that is what's actually bringing this build together and making it hit so hard and so consistently. What is going on, everybody? I'm super excited to bring you guys the build guide that's going to explain the setup that has been making waves in the community with the M16 that no one ever uses, and Breaking Point. We're bringing it together, and I'm going to explain how I do it so that we're super consistent with our uptime on the damage, and we're hitting so hard. Let's get straight into the build classification so you can see all about it, and then we'll talk about all the pieces, all my decisions, thought processes, and even some variations so you can tweak it to your playstyle. Alright, so I've decided to call this build the Sleeper Cell, which I think is very fitting given the gear that we're using is pretty low-key for sure, but when it activates, like in this setup, oh man, is it strong and a force to be reckoned with. And Sleeper Cell also applies to kind of how Breaking Point works, where you don't have the stacks, but then when they hit on the reload, it is strong. This is clearly a legendary certified build. You saw me put up top damage by quite a bit with this setup in one of my matches. I've been using it actually. I have been having trouble putting it down. It is great for legendary, especially the way that I have it set up for group play. So this is actually a full red DPS build, and that's not my usual go-to. I like doing the tank DPS hybrids, but this was divine intervention from the Oracle tier of my members. I was trying to figure out what direction to take my first Tinkerer build, and so I made a post out to them, gave them the opportunity to influence where I took the setup, and they chose full red DPS, so shout out to them and join the members if you are interested in something like that. It helps support the channel. The purpose of this, like I was saying, is figuring out my first build with the Tinkerer. I didn't want to do something that was basically just a striker build and slapping on another talent. I really wanted to explore what we could unlock that was new and special with the fact that we can double up on talents. And I'll talk all about that when we get into the pieces. The playstyle here is cover base, so you do have to stick in cover. We're playing from pretty far back, and we're using a rifle. It is pretty fun. If they start shooting back at you, it's not the most fun, but if you like a full red DPS, you're going to be used to this sort of playstyle, and there's no shields involved here. Farmability, I would say, is medium. We are using the Tinkerer, obviously, but we're not using any other named or exotic pieces, because you can't, and it's a full red, so to really push it to the ends with like maximum weapon damage and crits, it could be a little bit of a harder farm, but I don't think it's that crazy. Alright y'all, we're in game now. I'm going to walk you through my whole thought process and talk about the main synergies that are going on with why this is so strong. So first, let's start with looking at the Tinkerer. So what we got here, right, is why not both? The whole point of this is that we can stack two weapon talents. Let's see what we got going on here. And I mentioned that a lot of people have been doing what I would say pretty simple or basic builds. Check out the Tinkerer masterclass that I did where I explained everything about how to best use this. And what I was saying there is essentially that a utility talent plus a damage talent is really where it's at, and I think is what we're going to be taking advantage of to make some unique and creative setups. That's what makes the Tinkerer special. If you're going full damage and trying to just stack two more damage talents, like, you could accomplish that with Coyotes essentially. In any case, we're trying to do a utility plus a damage. And so I started looking at different weapon types in the library here, just looking at all of the different talents, and LMG seemed to be a popular one, for example, because they have stuff like Frenzy. This is a weapon class specific talent that you don't find on other ones. That's why the Huntsman, the new AR, was so special, because it came with an LMG talent. And that's when I started really looking at the talents we have here in rifles, because we do have a few specific ones, right? We have Rifleman, Boomerang, and then what I was leaning into is Lucky Shot. I got this idea actually from the Baker's Dozen, which was around when I started playing the game. That was the weapon to have, M1A, Baker's Dozen. So I wanted to look at Lucky Shot. And so this is what started the rabbit hole and what brought this build together is, okay, so Tinker, let's use 2 talents. Lucky Shot is going to be really interesting, right? It not only increases our magazine capacity, but it makes it so miss shots from cover, you don't spend the bullet. They have a 100% chance to return to the magazine. It's a bit weird the way they describe it, but essentially, you don't spend any bullets that aren't hitting targets. So this is a utility talent, but it's also, you could look at it as a sustain damage talent. The increased magazine capacity and the fact that you don't spend any bullets that aren't hitting means that you're getting your full mag damage every mag, and you're also pushing out really long the time in between your reloads. So it's making your sustained damage be your burst, essentially, is what's going on. So it's another way to look at damage is from a different perspective rather than the raw damage that we're getting from Ranger. This is a really strong talent. It's one of my favorite, especially in Legendary, because it's super consistent and you don't need to worry about proccing anything on kill or anything like that. So now we're stacking a utility / sustain damage talent with raw damage with the Ranger. And this is where it starts to get interesting. So we're still hitting really hard because we're keeping Ranger. We're pushing out our burst damage as much as possible. But the really interesting thing here is missed shots from cover have a 100% chance to return to the magazine. And so I started looking at what could really abuse that. And that's Breaking Point. Now, Breaking Point doesn't get a lot of love because it doesn't have strong uptime. You also need to make sure you hit all your shots to actually get those stacks, right? So you could miss the whole mag and then hit a reload, and then rifle shoot slow, and then you actually won't be getting anything from on point here. But this is the secret sauce. Lucky Shot is ensuring that all of our bullets in the mag are hitting. So by the time we hit our next reload, which is going to activate Breaking Point, all the bullets in the mag that would have missed and we would have lost the stack, they come right back. So it's guaranteeing that every time we have maximum, or just about near max, on Breaking Point, which is what's really crazy, and it's bringing it to a different level. Now, of course, you could have run a rifle with Lucky Shot before and done the same sort of idea with Breaking Point, but with how much is going on here and all the trade-offs you would have to make to try to make Breaking Point work, and then you're trading off on a damage talent by running Lucky Shot. This is where I feel like we're actually unlocking something new with Tinkerer, because now we're running Ranger as well as Lucky Shot, which is making sure that we're still hitting hard when we don't have Breakpoint. So if we take a look at the rest of the build here, we're running Breakpoint with the chest. I really think this is a good idea because it gives us 50% extra duration on our timer when we have Breakpoint active. And look, if we're doing the whole Breakpoint thing, you might as well lean into it a little bit and try to keep that uptime even more, especially with how much that we're getting those stacks, right? Those stacks are really meaningful because we're getting full Breakpoint every time because of Lucky Shot. So I figured let's make them last longer and run the chest instead of something else. However, I did take the opposite approach over here with the backpack. The Breakpoint backpack, alright, I just checked. I don't have the Breakpoint backpack on me, but essentially what it does is it increases our weapon damage stacks from 4 to 7. So we're getting quite a bit more weapon damage on those stacks. But I chose not to run it because we're already running the chest, which I do think is a good idea, and I would run the chest over the backpack. But I didn't want to go too much into Breaking Point and rely on only doing damage when we have Breakpoint up by running another high-end backpack, with, in this case, I'm choosing Grupo. You could probably run Overlord or something that might do more damage. This is just the backpack I had, but essentially all red with Vigilance. This is making it so that we still hit really hard when we don't have Breakpoint, and then Breakpoint really activates that sleeper cell and brings us to a whole new level. Alright, as we get into the range here, I want to talk about the M16 and why it is that I chose the M16 for this setup. Now, I talked about the synergies and what's going on here with Breakpoint and Lucky Shot, Tinker plus Ranger, right? You don't need the M16 to activate this, right? But I thought with everything we have going on here, this is the time to bring out the M16. I've had this God rolled one that just had to do a little optimizing on, and the talent was open, so it was time to bring it out. Why do people not use the M16? Well, that's generally because it feels a little weird, the whole burst thing. You do have to get into a flow to make sure you're keeping up with the maximum theoretical fire time and RPM of the M16 and its burst function. The other thing too is when you're shooting, you see the 3 bullets go up. So they're not hitting 3 on the spot. You also need to manage not just your recoil in between bursts, but during the burst itself, it's hitting in different spots. Like if I aim like here, you'll see I got like body shot, crit body shot, headshot, because it's spraying up like that. Now, with Breaking Point, you do want a fast firing rifle. This one has RPM 400, but with the burst, I feel like we're going through those bullets pretty fast because we're draining 3 in every trigger pull. So if you hit one of your bursts on a target, I think it does go a long way. The other rifle I would recommend is the ACR SS. Also shoots really fast, so if you don't want to do the whole burst thing, you can go with an ACR SS. I really only pick those two. When you start getting into something like the lightweight M4, our RPM is going low, and we want to keep it as high as possible so that we can burn through our mag as fast as possible to then activate Breaking Point. Now, the other reason I thought it fit really well was because of the handling. So if we go to start talking about Breaking Point more now, there's a couple things going on here. All right. One, I talked about timing and draining the mag. It's weird because your maximum stack size is the size of the magazine. So the whole idea here is that you need to hit your whole mag's worth to get the most percentage of your Breaking Point stacks. But the total stacks is not fixed. It actually depends on your mag size. And here, you'll see I'll have it at 60. And you could go even more. I tried running like a Zwei on the backpack. You can get another 15%. But essentially, it depends on the mag size, right? So what's weird is that it pairs with rifles, okay, which generally shoot slower. And then you have to burn through that mag and hit all your shots. And you want to run a bigger mag so that you can get more stacks total, but then it takes longer to go through them. And then the stacks only last for 10 seconds. 15 because we're running the chest over here. But it doesn't scale with your mag size, actually. So it could take you a really long, if you're using a slow firing rifle, it could take you a really long time to get through all of your mag, but then you're only getting 10 seconds uptime. So you want to pick a faster firing weapon, which was the M16 for me, and then with the burst, I feel like it goes through it pretty fast. Now the other side of the benefits, of course it gives us weapon damage, which is why we're hitting so hard, but it gives us weapon handling as well. And that is really, really strong, especially with rifles. I feel like take the most advantage of just general handling because accuracy is nice, so is stability. Whereas other weapons like an SMG, you don't really need stability, you kind of prefer accuracy. So rifles take advantage of this, and specifically the M16. I was talking about why people don't use it is because the 3-round burst isn't consistent. But when you have the stacks up, like you saw in the gameplay, I was beaming people in the head from far away. So it really is nice. Now, if we talk more on the M16, I'm actually going to touch on the attachments I have here, which I don't usually do. I only do that if there is something important to mention, and there is with the mag. So I'm choosing to go with the big mag, like I was talking about just now with how Breakpoint works. You want a bigger mag is going to give you more stacks, and especially because of the whole Lucky Shot synergy, we know that we're guaranteed to hit pretty much our whole mag. So running a bigger mag means more stacks. There is something to be said about running a smaller mag or keeping it really small, because then you'll cycle through it faster and get more cycles of breakpoint, but then you're not really getting a significant amount of boost from the breakpoint stacks. So with how we have it set up here, it's really fun to have it trigger and then you go crazy on the damage. I would recommend to run the bigger mag. And then I'm actually running stability here. You could run accuracy as well, but I found stability to be the most helpful, especially in this amount. I think I actually had swapped it around too to run accuracy here as well in the gameplay. So I'm actually running non-crits. I have accuracy and stability on the weapon, and I know that we are getting a lot of handling from breakpoint, but this makes it so that my shots are quite tight. See that? I'm not doing any recoil control. And so they hit pretty tight, whereas if you didn't run either of these, you see how much more it kicks? I don't want to be waiting for breaking point to hit for me to hit my shots. I talk a lot about uptime, and so I think it's really strong here to keep the stability and accuracy on the weapon, and then it just gets even better when breaking point's active. Alright, now the other thing I wanted to talk about is the minor attributes. I had some questions on this, and you'll see I don't even actually have everything perfectly optimized, but I'm running crits everywhere, so that's putting my stats at 52 chance, 133 crit damage. This is pretty solid. And I'm going chance here and damage because I really don't like running headshot in Legendary. I'll give you a little insider information. That's why I've never done a Bighorn build. I don't like running headshot stuff because I just played Legendary, and there's a lot of things that don't have heads. You're fighting dogs and many tanks, and watching your damage completely drop because you're not getting headshot damage, and you've invested in that in your build is just not my style. You'll see what we have going on here, right, is uptime. I talk a lot about consistency of your damage, and that's why I think I always put up top damage with all these different kinds of builds, is because here we have crits, which will proc on anything, right? We're diversifying by having strong uptime on breaking point, but then running vigilance on our backpack so that we still hit when we don't have breaking point. There's a lot of things going on here that come together to make this build strong and hit hard all the time. Alright, y'all, just going over some of the other pieces here real quick. I'm running a revive hive because we're a squishy full red. I'm running the fixer drone, but I do swap that out a lot. If you're solo, I would use a decoy or a turret. You can run the smart cover if you want. You got options here. It's not essential for the build. Pistol doesn't really matter. I always keep a card with sledgehammer. It'll swap to it, give you an extra hive on your revive, as well as it'll help you out if you're running smart cover, and sledgehammer is useful if you're throwing some nades out. And then the more important decision here is I am running gunner for that handling and 10% armor on kill. I tried it out with sharpshooter as well. You could play around with this one. Again, it's not essential to the build. I had mentioned it earlier, but I do want to talk quickly about some variations as well that you could run to adapt this to your playstyle and the other things that I've tried. So the core here is really the Lucky Shot plus the Breakpoint, and then of course the Tinker to stack a weapon damage talent. I wouldn't swap Lucky Shot out. That is the secret sauce here. That is what's making us so powerful with Breaking Point. So that I would say is non-negotiable for this build. But the other talent is, you could run something else other than Ranger. You could run Strained if you really are keeping on that trigger. You could run, I don't know if Measure would work, to be honest. Maybe with one of the full auto rifles, not the burst one here. But you could run a different damage talent. That's up to you. If you're playing content where you're getting kills, you could run one of the on-kill ones as well, like Killer or something like that. So this one's up to you. I like Ranger. I did say that I think it is valuable to have the high-end backpack with Vigilance so that it stabilizes our damage uptime. I do think that's a good idea. You could run a different brand. You could run a different rifle as well, like I talked about ACR SS. We already went over that. And then skills you can swap out. I really think, though, you got to keep the core with crit damage, breaking point with the chest, and then the M16 with Lucky Shot. It works. It just works. Alright, y'all, there you have it. That is the full build guide and all of the thoughts that went into putting this synergy together. And it works. It is super fun. It's the only build I've been using in this past week. It's really good. Now, I do want to mention again, if y'all appreciate the thought that I put into a build, imagine what I could do if I made a build for you. And I can. We're actually running a build raffle that's going to happen on September the 8th for all the members that join the channel. I just activated channel memberships. And so if you join in any tier by September the 8th, we're then going to run a raffle, and the winner I'm going to reach out to, and you can tell me whatever you want to use in a build, and I will try to make it work at this level of detail. It's going to be JOTE certified. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Hit the sub, hit the like. I appreciate all of it, and I try to reply to all comments, so let's get some discussion down in there. And until the next one, enjoy.